The moment I saw the footage, her hand sliding across his back, their heads tilted, close lips barely apart, I felt my lungs stop. Not break, not gasp, just stop. In that frozen second, I wasn't a husband. I wasn't a father. I wasn't even a man anymore. I was a fool who built an empire on trust only to watch it rot from the inside. She didn't just betray our marriage. She betrayed the silence I gave her, the power I never used, the daughter she swore to protect. And the worst part, she looked happy, radiant, even whispering to a man who wasn't me at an event I funded using connections I gave her. That was the moment everything ruptured. And I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I made a choice that night. I'd burn the truth into the ground so no one, no matter how powerful, could bury it again. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not in that city. Not on that rooftop. And sure as hell not laughing like that with him. I hadn't been looking for trouble. That's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't give you warning. It walks in dressed as routine. I was working late that night exactly like I always did on Fridays, when Zaria was with my sister. My office overlooked downtown Brickell, all glass and silver and sky. At that hour, Miami looked like money and silence. I liked it that way. No noise, no lies, just clean data streams, cool air, and the occasional flicker of traffic on the bay. I was reviewing security footage from a private event. One of our clients hosted an elite financial tech gala we helped monitor for facial compliance testing. It was standard protocol for my law tech firm, Reyes Protocol, and I'd already approved the digital retention parameters. That's what made it so strange when the screen glitched. Just a flicker. Then the image sharpened, and there she was, Kasira, my wife of 12 years. Hair curled back in waves, green satin dress clinging like it was made for secrets. She was seated at the rooftop bar of the Zenith Hotel, glass of wine in hand, her laughter tilted toward a man whose name I didn't know yet, but whose face I would never forget. He leaned in. Their arms touched. Her lips hovered dangerously close to his ear. Her fingers traced his wrist. It was the kind of touch you don't give your brother or your boss or your friend. It was intimate, familiar, brazen. I stared at the timestamp. 9:38 p.m. 2 nights ago. Kasira had told me she was in D.C., speaking at a closed-door media panel on AI ethics. She even sent a photo of her boarding pass and a hotel room with a view of the Capitol Dome. And yet, here she was, 20 stories above the Miami skyline, in a dress I'd never seen, with a man whose hand she didn't seem in a hurry to let go. My first instinct wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak either. I felt nothing. That scared me more than anything. I didn't pause the footage. I didn't rewind. I didn't breathe. I simply downloaded the raw file to an external drive, encrypted it under our internal codebase as Ares Protocol, and dropped it into my offline vault. I knew what I was looking at. But I also knew Kasira. Or I thought I did. She wasn't just my wife. She was a media personality, sharp, poised, respected in journalism circles and on the speaking circuit. She knew how to navigate power, how to present morality as strategy. She wore credibility like armor, and the world praised her for it. She'd built a name out of telling other people's stories, and now she'd rewritten ours without my consent. I sat there in my office chair, hands flat on the desk. The air was too cold, or maybe it was just me. My phone buzzed. A message from Kasira. Flight delayed. Hoping to be back by noon tomorrow. Love you and miss you. Tell Zaria I'm proud of her. I stared at the screen. 3 lies in 1 sentence. I didn't respond. I powered down the monitor's stood and walked across the room to the framed photo that had sat on my shelf since the day we moved in. It was taken on our 5th anniversary Kasira, in red me in black tie. Zaria just a baby between us. We looked young, real. I didn't smash it, I didn't throw it. I turned it face down. My office door clicked behind me as I left, but something inside me didn't follow. It stayed there cold and still somewhere behind that photo, somewhere between love and self-respect. The next morning, I woke up at 5:03 a.m. without an alarm. I made coffee the way I always did, 1 spoon of Demerara splash of oat milk stirred twice counterclockwise. Ritual was all I had now. Zaria was still asleep. 11 years old, kind-hearted, smarter than she realized. She didn't know yet that her world was being rearranged in silence, and I wasn't going to let her feel it. Not yet. By 6:15, I was back in the vault eyes, scanning metadata from the footage. My team's facial recognition software tagged every individual on the rooftop that night. I filtered through the results. His name was Galen Moreau, former media advisor, political fixer, known for dark strategy, or so his leaked consultancy deck bragged. He wasn't just any man. He was the kind of man Kasira used to criticize on national television. The kind she once claimed embodied everything broken about American influence. So why was she sitting in the dark with him? Why the lies I didn't confront her? I didn't need to. I knew something deeper was at play, and if I pushed too soon, I'd tip my hand. That wasn't how I worked. Instead, I launched a containment node. I called in a forensic auditor. Quiet. Paid in crypto. Tasked with tracing Galen's digital threads over the last 6 months. Every shared location device, ping travel manifest. I needed to know how long this had been happening. I needed to know if I'd been played or weaponized. That evening, Kasira came home. She smelled like lilac and lavender, and something else I couldn't place, guilt, maybe. She kissed my cheek, said she was exhausted. I told her Zaria missed her. She smiled and went to unpack. I didn't ask how her panel went. I already knew she'd been nowhere near Capitol Hill. That night, as she lay beside me, scrolling through news headlines she wasn't reading, I stared at the ceiling and felt the quietest ache. Not because I'd lost her, because I now knew she'd been gone long before I noticed. 3 days later, the footage hit the final phase of processing. I watched it one more time, not for proof, but for something else. A flicker. A tell. Anything that said she'd hesitated, that she'd felt what she was doing. But there was nothing. Only laughter. The kind of laughter that doesn't come from guilt, but freedom. And in that moment, I stopped asking why. I started planning what came next. 3 days after Kasira returned from her trip, the forensic results came in. I was sitting at my desk in the study, sipping stale coffee, and staring at the screensaver rotating family photos I hadn't had the nerve to delete. The email came in quietly, no alert, no sound, just the faint flicker of a new message. I opened it and scrolled. Lines of data, timestamps, geolocation logs, hotel check-ins. Kasira's lie wasn't casual. It was engineered. Her phone had been turned off just long enough to fall off-grid between 2 towers on the edge of Coral Gables the same night she was supposed to be in D.C. A burner phone registered under a temporary name had pinged several high-profile spots, rooftop bars, a rented suite at the Sky Glass residences, and a digital room key used by a man named Galen Moreau. The overlap was surgical. My jaw tightened. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I simply stared at the visual overlay of her path and his over the past 2 months. So many overlaps, so many silences explained. Dinners she canceled. Flights she said were rescheduled. Weekends she needed alone to prep for interviews. It was all mapped out in perfect betrayal. Zaria was in the other room sketching something with headphones on. She was humming off-key, carefree. I didn't want her to hear any of this. Didn't want her heart crushed by a truth she didn't ask for. That was my burden, and I'd carry it. I tapped the encrypted channel on my tablet and sent one message. Confirm deployment Phase 1. Within 10 minutes, Remy called. Remy Kael was a fixer, but not the kind people whisper about in parking garages. He was sharp corporate and moved in the background of power executive class security for high-stakes asset protection. We'd met during a Fortune 1000 arbitration case I was asked to mediate. I never thought I'd need him for personal reasons. You want exposure control or both? He asked, direct, as always. Both, I said. But with deniability. He paused. You want a go stop? I want to wreck them without saying a word. Quietly. Completely. Understood. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. That was the beauty of men like Remy. They dealt in outcome, not explanation. That night, Kassira made spaghetti. She wore my hoodie like she used to back when we were broke and idealistic. She smiled like the woman I married hummed along to an old Miguel song while stirring sauce. And I wondered, was it all fake, or was she just that good? I watched her laugh at a cooking video, and something in me died for the second time. We ate together in silence. Zaria talked about a school project on media ethics. I almost choked on my wine. Kassira gave me a look. You okay? Just tired, I said. She nodded like she believed me. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she just didn't care. That weekend, I drove Zaria to my sister Tessa's place in Boca. I told her I needed a few days to finish prepping for a critical investor summit. She gave me a kiss on the cheek and told me to win big. She didn't know the summit was real, but the war I was preparing for had nothing to do with money. By Monday, I was in motion. Remy's team intercepted Galen's encrypted cloud deep dives into client folders, donor records, political leaks, even a private podcast prototype he'd been developing with Kassira under the fake brand Cottrell Word. It was sleazy, viral bait journalism targeting powerful figures like my own clients. And Galen had written about me in a test script. They were prepping to turn my life into a case study in quiet corruption. I laughed. It wasn't even clever, just sensationalism wrapped in faux righteous branding. But it would have worked. Coming from Kassira, it would have hit hard. She had credibility, voice, beauty. She understood how to control narratives. And she was going to use that power to destroy me before leaving. This wasn't just an affair. It was a betrayal by design. They didn't want to just break my heart. They wanted my silence to look like guilt. I didn't tell anyone, not even my legal partner, not even Tessa. I needed full containment. Remy asked one question before initiating the sting. Do you want her destroyed in private? Or in front of a crowd? I answered immediately. A crowd. He exhaled like he'd been hoping for that. Then we do it during the gala. The Reyes Protocol Annual Summit was scheduled in 2 weeks, a black-tie tech legal event filled with industry giants, federal contacts investors, and social elites. It was the perfect stage. My firm was hosting. My name was on the banners, and Kassira had RSVP'd as a keynote guest. I'd already requested her not to speak this year. I told her the optics didn't work with recent sponsorship conflicts. She'd seemed offended, but she didn't argue. That's how I knew she was hiding something. Kasira never stayed quiet, unless she was already 2 moves ahead. Good. Let her stay smug. It would make the fall more cinematic. I shifted into Phase 2. Remy created a closed-circuit overlay at the venue, hidden audio recording, motion triggers, behavioral facial analysis, synced with FBI-provided metadata. Kasira and Galen had no idea they'd been flagged in a federal surveillance system already. Galen's previous campaign tactics had crossed ethical lines. The Bureau didn't act yet because the heat wasn't public. But that would change. I invited Darius Colt, a friend and federal contact with discretion. He specialized in gray area digital crime, gave him full access to the metadata and a sealed copy of Quatrell Word's file bank. That was enough to flag probable conspiracy to defame and destroy via premeditated tech-based narrative warfare, a fancy way of saying they were weaponizing their voices to ruin careers and profit off of it. Darius didn't say much. He just nodded and said, "We'll be there." Quiet, unless necessary. I liked that. The night before the gala, Kasira wore lingerie to bed for the first time in 6 months. She touched me like the past hadn't happened. I didn't move. I didn't resist. But I didn't respond either. She whispered, "Are we okay?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream that she was a liar, a fraud, a hypocrite in silk. But I just said, "We will be." She smiled and kissed my shoulder. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the minutes slide off the clock and wondered what she dreamed about. The next day, the gala opened to flashbulbs and whispered ambition. Kasira wore emerald again. Galen arrived late, arrogantly flashing a drink and smirking like he owned the air. The cameras loved them. The room didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness a public undoing. At 8:32 p.m., the lights dimmed for the Legacy Impact video segment, a highlight reel showcasing voices who'd made a difference in the tech legal world. But Remy had spliced something else in. Midway through the montage, a split-second flicker appeared barely a frame. Then another. Then a third. Suddenly the screen froze. Audio dropped, and the room held its breath. Then it played. The rooftop video, the laughter, the wine, the whispered touches. Every guest saw it. Every angle was clear. Then the Quatrell Word mock trailer rolled with voiceovers from Kasira and Galen spliced between news clips of my firm, my name, my family. The screen cut to black. A single line appeared in white font. "Every empire has its weakness. Ours is the truth." Gasps filled the air. Kasira turned toward me, eyes wide, lips parting in horror. "Logan, what did you do?" I didn't respond. Then the lights snapped back on, and the FBI walked in. The silence after the screen went dark was louder than any explosion. Kasira stood frozen, her body rigid, lips trembling. Her hands clutched the stem of her untouched champagne glass, like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. Galen didn't flinch. He just raised his brow, squared his jaw, and looked straight ahead like he'd prepared for this moment, or thought he had. The lights came up a second later, and that's when they saw the FBI. 2 agents moved quickly toward Galen. Darius Colt trailed behind them, calm and steady, his badge already out. The crowd parted. Galen's eyes darted toward Kasira for the first time in what had to be months. "Stay calm," he muttered under his breath, then turned to the agents. "This is some mistake." It wasn't. Darius didn't speak until Galen was in cuffs walking him out through the hushed ballroom. He didn't need to say a word. His presence was enough clean, legal federal. The crowd saw what they were meant to see. I stayed still. My hands folded calmly in front of me, one thumb running a circle across my wedding band. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just watched the same way I'd watched that rooftop footage, calm and surgical. Kasira turned to me, her voice caught between disbelief and desperation. "Logan, what did you do?" I met her eyes and let the moment breathe. "I told the truth," I said simply. Before she could respond, Darius approached her. He wasn't arresting her. Not yet. But he did what I asked, served her with a federal notice of investigation into conspiracy to defame and destroy digital manipulation, unlawful information warfare, and aiding a target under active surveillance. Her hands shook as she accepted the papers. People whispered. Phones recorded. This wasn't just social ruin. It was a collapse in real time. Kasira tried to speak first to me, then to anyone, but her voice cracked under the weight of exposure. No one was coming to her rescue. Her power had always lived in the shadows, favor charm, plausible deniability. But light exposes everything, and tonight she was drowning in it. She didn't follow Galen out. She didn't flee either. She just stood there as if leaving would make it real. Remy approached me later that evening in the side hallway, away from the press and crowd. He handed me a small, encrypted drive. "You're clean," he said. "The Bureau's satisfied. Her files show intent." Galen's voice memos and bank transfers sealed it. "It's over." "Not yet," I replied. "Not until Zarya's protected." Remy nodded. "Custody next." "Yeah," I said, "and financials." By the next morning, the story had spread across every major outlet. Tech Summit turns scandal, FBI arrests. Galen Moreau, during live Gala power, couple implodes in public eye. Kasira's name trended for all the wrong reasons. But this wasn't about the headlines. This was about accountability. Quiet, methodical, and permanent. I filed for emergency custody that same day. My lawyer delivered the motion to the judge with all necessary documentation evidence of Kasira's deceit, her reckless exposure of our daughter to media scrutiny, her conspiracy with a known digital manipulator. We had receipts. We had motive. We had intent. And within 48 hours, I had temporary full custody of Zarya, pending full hearing. Kasira tried to call, left voicemails, emailed me, begged me to let her explain to talk without lawyers between us. I didn't answer. Not because I hated her, but because everything that needed saying had already been said through her actions. I wasn't going to argue with someone who only told the truth when exposed. Instead, I took Zarya to the Everglades for the weekend. Just the two of us. No phones, no headlines. We sat in a rented cabin while the world burned outside. She didn't ask about her mother. Not at first. But on the second night, as we sat by a low-burning fire, she whispered, Is she okay?" I looked her in the eyes. She will be. But she made some choices that hurt people. That hurt us. Zarya was quiet. Did she lie? I nodded. She did. She didn't cry. She just leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Then I'm glad you told the truth." That was the first time I let myself cry. Not loud, not desperate, just quiet tears that ran down my cheeks as I wrapped my arm around the only thing in my life that still felt pure. Meanwhile, Kasira was trying to clean up the mess in every way she could. She issued a statement through her PR firm claiming creative misrepresentation and intent taken out of context. She didn't mention Galen. She blamed editing, blamed weaponized surveillance. But the world had seen what they'd seen, and I made sure they didn't forget. Remy leaked Galen's own memos, voice recordings of strategy calls, slides from Cutrell-Word's pitch deck. Everything painted a picture of intentional narrative assassination, not just toward me, but toward public figures, brands, even non-profit leaders. Galen was looking at federal time. And Kasira. Her brand was radioactive. Her publisher dropped her. Networks canceled her appearances. Brands pulled endorsements. Clients terminated speaking contracts. Every door she'd once waltzed through had slammed shut. And she knew it. When the divorce papers were delivered, she didn't contest. Not the division of assets, not the custody terms, nothing. The woman who once debated with senators and CEOs didn't even argue for a fair share. She just signed. When we met for the final mediation session, she looked like a different person. No makeup, dark circles, a nervous tick in her jaw that wouldn't stop. She sat across from me and whispered, "Did you ever love me?" At the end, I didn't answer right away. I looked at her, really looked, and I remembered the early years, the nights we stayed up building our dreams, her laugh in my passenger seat, her hand gripping mine when Zaria was born. But I also remembered the lies. "I loved who you used to be," I said, "but I don't know who you are now." She nodded like she expected that. Before I left, she reached into her purse and pulled out a drawing one of Zaria's torn from a notebook. "She gave this to me," she said softly. Said it was her favorite memory. I took it and saw what it was, a drawing of the three of us in the kitchen making pancakes. Crayon-colored joy in every line. It nearly broke me. "Don't take her love for granted," I said, standing. "Because once it's gone, it doesn't come back." That night I sat in Zaria's room as she slept, the drawing on my lap. I wasn't proud of everything I'd done, but I was sure of one thing: I'd protected her. And Kasira. She got to live in the ruins she built. The world doesn't give you a moment to breathe when you're a man in control of a scandal. It either tries to strip that control away, or it begs to profit from it. The Monday after Kasira signed the divorce papers, I sat in the Reyes Protocol boardroom while half a dozen senior partners discussed expansion into offshore compliance jurisdictions. On paper, the company was surging. Our valuation had jumped nearly 18% after my public image as a calculated but composed whistleblower gained traction. Internally, though, everyone was tight-lipped. The media storm had made me a symbol of quiet vengeance, and nobody knew how to navigate that without stepping on landmines. I kept my answers short. Strategic. It wasn't the time to be emotional. By noon, the room cleared. Only Daniela, my chief counsel, stayed behind. She looked at me over her laptop screen. "We got an inquiry from the Times. Full feature piece on men who expose corruption in their own marriages. Want to be the lead?" I shook my head. "I'm not a symbol. I'm a father trying to give my daughter a quiet life." Daniela raised an eyebrow. "Quiet doesn't exist anymore." "Not for you." She wasn't wrong. The pressure hadn't stopped. If anything, it had evolved. Now it was polite, disguised as opportunity. Brands wanted me to speak. Lawyers wanted me to co-write a book. Hell, a network sent a feeler about adapting the saga for prestige streaming content. I declined it all. This wasn't a story I wanted glamorized. That same afternoon, I got the alert on my secure channel. The footage from the gala had leaked again, except this time it wasn't coming from Remy's team or a media outlet. It was coming from Kasira herself. On her private X account, one that she used to curate personal essays and academic thoughts, she'd uploaded a carefully edited version of the rooftop video. It cut just before the intimacy, just before the hand on the thigh. It was designed to look ambiguous, tasteful even. Her caption read, "Not everything filmed tells the truth. Selective surveillance is still manipulation." My jaw clenched. She was trying to rewrite the narrative again. Within hours, her loyalists started spinning it, claims that I had weaponized FBI resources for personal revenge, that this was coercive reputation control, that I, not she, was the abuser because I'd acted with precision and power, and that made people uncomfortable. The accusations didn't bother me, but what did Zaria saw it? She came to me that night with her tablet tears pooled in her eyes. "Why is Mom saying you're lying?" I sat down beside her on the couch. Because sometimes people tell themselves stories to feel better about the things they've done. "But you know what the truth is." She bit her lip. "She said you used the FBI to hurt her." I nodded slowly. "And you know I didn't. You know I did what was necessary to protect us." Zaria stared down at the tablet. "I don't like how people are talking about you." I took the device from her hands and shut it off. "Then we don't give them power. We keep living. We stay focused." She hugged me tightly and whispered, "I don't want you to go away." And that's when I knew Kasira's campaign wasn't about saving her reputation. It was about forcing me out of Zaria's life, not through law, through shame. 2 days later, her legal team filed a petition to review custody citing emotional manipulation, intentional alienation, and abuse of institutional power. Her strategy was clear. If she couldn't win the narrative in the media, she'd try to reverse it through court. I sent the documents straight to Daniela. "They're playing messy," she muttered. "But we're cleaner. We stay factual." I agreed, but privately I called Remy. "Do it," I said. "Release the rest, all of it. No cuts, no edits." He didn't ask for clarification. The next morning, the full-length footage went live. No music, no commentary, just reality. 30 uninterrupted minutes. Kasira at the bar, Galen's hand, her smile, the whisper, the kiss. No doubt, no ambiguity, no room for spin. And beneath it, a time-synced audio leak of Galen's private messages. We're not just telling a story. We're reshaping a man's legacy. That's the power we hold. The court hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I spent the days leading up to it, ensuring Zaria stayed shielded school drop-offs, art class pickups, weekend visits to my sister. Kasira hadn't requested visitation during that time. I think she knew she couldn't face Zaria yet. The night before court, I slept maybe 2 hours. I wasn't worried about losing. I was worried about what Zaria would see if this dragged on. The woman who gave her life, now reduced to her worst moment on repeat. I didn't want her future colored by Kasira's collapse, but I couldn't protect her from it either. In court, Kasira looked composed, but her voice cracked every third sentence. Her attorney made grand claims: selective editing, emotional coercion, strategic media deployment, and optical gaslighting. I listened to it all with a straight face. Let them throw buzzwords at the judge. Facts are stubborn things. Daniela stood with a thumb drive. "Your Honor, this contains over 6 hours of footage, emails, time-coded evidence, and a record of statements made by both parties, all independently verified. The judge didn't even need it." The headline that broke that morning had done enough damage. Insiders confirm Kasira Reyes admitted affair in unreleased audio. It was over. The judge didn't just reaffirm custody in my favor. He ordered Kasira to undergo media bias rehabilitation therapy and suspended her visitation until further psychological evaluation could determine her ability to maintain a neutral parental relationship. She didn't cry. She just sat there like stone. As I walked out of the courthouse, I passed her without saying a word. But she turned. "You always knew how to win, Logan." I stopped, looked at her. "And you always thought you'd never lose." I didn't wait for her reaction. That night I sat beside Zarya as she did homework and played lo-fi music in the background. She looked at me and smiled. "Are things better now?" I nodded. "They're getting there." But inside I knew the fight wasn't over, because power doesn't disappear. It just changes faces. The days after the custody ruling should have felt like peace. But peace doesn't come right after war. It comes in fragments, untrusting, fragile, waiting to be ambushed again. The media frenzy had calmed. Kasira had gone radio silent. Galen's trial was scheduled to begin in 6 months, and I had Zarya full-time, which meant I could finally structure our life around stability again. No camera flashes, no whispered conversations over tablets, no more pretending like everything was okay. But stability didn't mean safety. That morning as I walked into my office, Daniela was already standing at my desk, her arms crossed. The look on her face told me something was off. "You're being audited," she said flatly. "Not by the IRS, by the board." I didn't blink. "Our board?" She nodded. "They're calling it a governance review, but it's retaliation." It made sense. The Reyes Protocol Board was clean on paper, but filled with executives who hated volatility, and to them, I had become the very embodiment of it. Even though I exposed corruption, even though I protected my family, in their eyes, I had become a liability. "They'll dig for anything," she continued. "Missed filings, procedural blind spots. If they find it, they'll use it to sideline you. So they weren't trying to fire me. They were trying to neutralize me." I paced slowly, absorbing the blow. "Who initiated it?" I asked. Daniela hesitated. "Delvin." "Of course. Delvin Rao, the COO. Smooth-talking opportunist with just enough ambition and just enough cowardice to wait until someone else bled before he moved in. He'd always played nice in meetings, smiled at my decisions, but he hated that my name came before his on every contract and media quote. "You think he's working with her?" I asked. Daniela shrugged. "I don't think Kasira needed to reach out. Delvin's the type to sniff blood and act like he's doing it for the company." I stared out the window, the Miami skyline glowing beneath morning haze. I'd come too far to let snakes eat what I built. I wasn't going to let a man who never sacrificed a thing take ground I bled for. "Then we dig too," I said. "Start internal compliance checks on everything under Delvin's name. I want to know what corners he cut while I was putting out fires." Daniela nodded, already texting her assistant. That evening I went home early. Zarya was on the porch, drawing the sunset with bold, messy strokes. When she saw me, she lit up. "You're home before dark." I smiled, trying something new. "Like being human," she teased. She didn't know how much that hit. Being human in my world felt like a risk. Vulnerability was currency, and if you gave too much of it, people cashed in. "How about pizza tonight?" I asked. "Can we get that wood-fired one with the spicy honey done?" For a few hours, the world softened. We ate on the floor, laughed about her school art competition, and watched reruns of a show we'd seen a dozen times. It felt normal until I got the call from Remy. "You're not going to like this," he said. "Try me. Kasira's working with a media restoration firm. Private funders. Looks like she's planning a redemption arc." I didn't answer. I already knew it was coming. They're building a narrative about female resilience. Wronged by power, betrayed by the institutions she believed in. She betrayed them, I said coldly. "Doesn't matter. She's got a ghostwriter, and they're shopping interviews again. Not mainstream yet, but niche platforms are listening. What about the footage they're calling it manipulated? Editing war. Out of context clips. Emotional trauma twisting reality. You know the drill. Of course I did. It was the same weapon Galen tried to use against me, reputation laundering through self-victimization. Kasira hadn't changed tactics. She'd just changed the packaging. How close are they to getting it live? I asked. Weeks, maybe less. The rage that rose in my chest wasn't hot, it was cold, focused. Let her speak, I said finally. I want the lies out. Then we'll bury them. Permanently. Remy paused. You sure? Yeah. She chose the battlefield. I'll choose the time. The next week unfolded like a storm brewing behind glass. Internally, Daniela's audits revealed that Delvin had approved a string of off-record vendor deals using third-party shells connected to a consulting firm in the Caymans. Clean on the outside, but the money trails were dirty. We packaged the report and submitted it to the board quietly. 3 days later, the governance audit on me was dropped without explanation. One snake down. Then came Kasira's interview. It aired on a podcast called Perspective Pulse, hosted by a performative journalist who made her name blending pseudotherapy with social commentary. The platform was small, but viral-friendly. Kasira sat in soft, lighting hair, pulled back voice low and fragile. I wasn't perfect, she said, but I was pushed, silenced. There was a power imbalance no one wanted to see. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. The context made it obvious. She cried at the 23-minute mark. The host cried with her. She said she lost everything, but was reclaiming her voice. The episode hit 600K streams in 24 hours. Then came the backlash. Because I had prepared. The day after the interview aired a clip surfaced one the public hadn't seen before. A screen recording of a video call between Kasira and Galen from a month before the gala. They were mocking the press. They'll eat it up, Galen said. You crying about your marriage while we're planning the next wave. Kasira laughed. I should win an Emmy. The internet turned instantly. Rage exploded across platforms. Brands that were quietly testing the waters for Kasira's comeback cut ties again. Even her loyal defenders had to fall silent. There was no spinning it now. Her redemption had become a confession. She issued an apology, but it was too late. The same people who'd praised her vulnerability now called her a manipulator. And I didn't have to say a word. That weekend I took Zaria to the zoo. She laughed at the flamingos and made me buy a ridiculous tiger hat. I didn't check my phone once, not until we got home. There was a letter on the counter. No envelope, just folded paper with my name on it. I opened it, recognized the handwriting immediately. I didn't expect forgiveness. I know I've become the worst version of myself. I just wanted you to know I see it now. You weren't trying to ruin me. You were trying to protect yourself from the ruin I already created. I've lost Zaria's trust and maybe I've lost her forever. That's on me. But don't let this war cost her more than it already has. She needs a father who doesn't have to carry both weights. Let me carry my own. It wasn't signed. She didn't need to. I folded the letter and placed it inside my safe. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because it was proof. That even the architects of chaos sometimes know what they've done. The letter haunted me. I told myself I had moved past her, that everything she'd done, the lies, the manipulation, the attempt to rewrite our reality was behind me. But reading her handwriting stripped of performance broke something in me I didn't even know I'd preserved. Remy offered to investigate the source of the leak, the clip from her video call with Galen. I told him not to bother. She was breaking, but for once it wasn't for the public to see. It was hers to endure alone. That was the difference between us. I handled pain in silence. She needed an audience. But maybe, just maybe, this time the silence was real. Still, her note rang in my head every time I looked at Zaria. Don't let this war cost her more than it already has. She was right about that. Our daughter deserved more than a battlefield to grow up in. 3 days later, I sat down with Zaria at the dining table. Her math homework spread between us. She was struggling with decimals, but her attention was divided. Dad, she said, pencil tapping is, Mom, still. In trouble, I didn't lie. Yes, but it's not your job to fix it. She nodded slowly, then looked up. Can I see her? That question came like a slow, dull blade. I didn't want to say no, but I couldn't say yes without risking everything I'd spent months securing. Maybe I said carefully. But not until I know she's ready, not just to see you, but to be honest. Zaria didn't argue. She just returned to her decimals. Later that night, I called Daniela and asked her to coordinate a legal verified supervised visit. 1 hour, neutral location, no press, no digital devices. If Kasira agreed, it would happen in the presence of a third-party monitor. 2 days later, she accepted. The visit was scheduled at a private family therapy center in Coconut Grove. I drove Zaria myself. She wore the same dress she'd sketched the week before, pale blue with sunflowers, and held a small card in her hand, something she'd made for her mother. You sure you're ready? I asked as we parked. I don't know, she admitted, but I want to see if she is. When the door opened and Kasira walked into the room, her eyes looked different. Hollow, not from vanity or victimhood, but from something closer to clarity. For the first time in years, she looked like someone who had run out of angles. Zaria stood. No hug. Just a long pause before she walked up and handed her the card. This is a picture of us making pancakes. Remember, Kasira's eyes welled up. She knelt slowly, hands trembling as she opened the card. I remember she whispered. Every moment. Then why did you change? Kasira looked up at her. Because I stopped listening to the people who loved me. I thought I needed a louder story. Zaria nodded. Well, I'm not loud, but I still love you. The monitor signaled the halfway point. Zaria glanced at me through the glass. Can she come to my art show? I hesitated. Kasira looked toward me too. Let's take it one day at a time, I said. The visit ended quietly, no dramatic hugs, no tears on the floor, just a fragile goodbye. But something shifted. For the first time, Kasira didn't try to reach out afterward. She didn't send flowers or texts. She respected the silence. That same week, I received final word from Galen's legal team. He had taken a deal, 2 years federal time, no media contact clause, forfeiture of assets related to Keytril Word and digital targeting operations. Remy smiled when he told me. Guy folded like a napkin. He knew his platform was done. That's not justice, I said. But it's a start. In a private hearing, my legal team finalized all remaining spousal financial restrictions. Kasira walked away with the house in Vermont and a yearly stipend for essentials. Not silence, not a bribe, just the settlement she'd agreed to from the start. She didn't argue. And I didn't gloat. She no longer felt like a threat. Not because I'd won, but because I'd rebuilt what she tried to burn down and made it stronger. At Rhea's protocol, the leadership team had settled. Delvin was out. Daniela stepped in as interim COO. Investor confidence was back, and clients were more loyal than ever. Still, I kept a low profile. No speaking gigs, no interviews, no memoirs. The narrative was no longer mine to control. But there was one moment I couldn't stay silent for. Zaria's art show. That Thursday evening, the school gym buzzed with parents and teachers praising canvas after canvas of chaotic beauty. Zaria's piece sat on a panel near the middle. It was a split-frame painting, 2 kitchens side by side. One full of color-warmth pancakes, stacked high. The other empty grayscale quiet. The caption underneath read, "Memory versus now." When I asked what it meant, she just shrugged. Sometimes what we miss isn't what we want back. We just want to remember it right. I swallowed hard. Kasira came in near the end of the show, escorted quietly by the staff. No scene. No fuss. She walked straight to Zaria's piece and stared at it for a long time. Zaria watched her, then walked over. "You can come to my next one." But no lies. Kasira looked like she wanted to say something, then just nodded. That night as we left, Zaria grabbed my hand and squeezed. "We're okay, right?" I looked down at her, at the girl who had held her world together better than either of her parents ever could. "We're more than okay," I said. "We're free." 6 months later, the silence finally felt like peace. No headlines, no subpoenas, no viral hashtags, just ordinary days, school drop-offs, board meetings, walks by the bay. The kind of life I used to take for granted. Kasira stayed quiet, too. No more interviews. No more cryptic posts. Whatever damage control team she'd hired had gone dark, and she'd retreated to the Vermont house like a ghost who finally knew it had overstayed its welcome. She never asked for more money, never filed another motion, never tried to rewrite the ending. I respected that more than I expected to. One afternoon, a package arrived at the office. No return address. Inside was a children's book manuscript. Handwritten. The title read, "The Girl Who Asked Questions." The dedication said, "To Zaria. I hope one day we can read this together again. Mom." I didn't show it to Zaria right away. I wasn't sure if it was closure or bait, but I held on to it. Not as a promise, but as a possibility. Not everything broken has to be destroyed. Sometimes it just needs time. That was the final lesson she taught me, unintentionally, of course. The courts granted full legal and physical custody to me with supervised visitation once per quarter. Kasira showed up to each one on time, respectful, subdued. She didn't bring gifts, she didn't cry. She just listened. When Zaria spoke, she leaned in like every word was a glass thread that might shatter if held too tightly. By spring, Zaria started asking about her again, not with longing, but with curiosity. Was Mom always like that? You know, before all this. I thought about it for a moment. She used to laugh more. We both did. We were different people back then. Zaria was quiet. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Maybe you both got tired of pretending." She wasn't wrong. The truth was, Kasira and I had stopped being a team long before the affair. That was just the explosion. The real damage was in the silence that came before the missed signals, the ambition that turned into competition, the trust that faded without either of us noticing. But out of that wreckage, something unshakable had formed. A bond between father and daughter no scandal could break. A clarity in my values. A filter for who got access to my time, my name, my energy. One of my last conversations with Remy felt like a full-circle moment. He came by the house on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, wearing his usual calm but dangerous look. "You're off their radar now," he said. "Galen's in prison. Kasira's off the airwaves. Your board's singing your praises again." I smirked. "And you? Still listening to everyone else's secrets?" He chuckled. "That's how I sleep at night, knowing I know more than anyone." We walked down to the dock behind the house. The water was still. Peaceful. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't sent you that footage?" he asked. I thought about that more often than I admitted. "Yeah," I said. "I think I would have kept dying slowly, smiling for pictures, raising my daughter around a lie, becoming a man I didn't respect." Remy nodded. "Sometimes the truth is a mercy, even when it breaks you." Before he left, he said something I hadn't expected. "You did right by her, Logan. And that's rare. Most people just want to win. You wanted to protect." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because deep down, I knew he was right. This wasn't just about revenge. It never had been. This was about protecting the only thing that mattered, Zaria's future, and my own self-respect. One evening, as summer began to roll in, I sat outside with Zaria, the sun-low sky streaked with pink. She was sketching again this time, a picture of our backyard complete with her swing and the small fire pit we'd built together. "Are you happy, Dad?" The question was simple, but loaded. "Yeah," I said. "I am." "Are you—" She looked up, her eyes steady. "I think I'm learning how to be." We sat there a while longer, not needing to say much else. Sometimes peace doesn't come in declarations. It comes in the quiet, in the space where pain used to live but doesn't anymore. I wasn't bitter, I wasn't angry, I didn't hate Kasira, but I didn't pity her either. She made her choices, and I made mine. And the life I rebuilt from the ashes, it wasn't perfect. It was better, because it was mine. In life, betrayal often arrives not as a storm, but as a quiet shift, a slow unraveling of trust, of certainty, of the person we thought would never hurt us. And yet from the ruins of that devastation, we are offered a rare and painful gift: clarity. Clarity about who we are, what we value, and what we will never tolerate again. True strength isn't about striking back. It's about standing firm when everything inside you screams to collapse. It's about protecting the quiet, sacred things, our dignity, our children, our peace. Some wounds don't heal the way we want them to, but in time, they become the place where wisdom grows. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming truth. Rebuilding a life with honesty, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. If the story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share where you're watching from, leave a comment, and let us know what part hit hardest. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next powerful story. Until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, and take care of your truth.